Union and Peter Cooper.
I also have my class list for HSS3, so everybody, so I have to count who's who's in class. It's a big subject, so obviously you don't want me to start in 1859 and go forwards. But since history has been invoked recently, I want to tell you about the uses of history, first of all. This is a very ancient institution by now. There are not many educational establishments that are over 100 years old even, but to be now, what, 152 years old, many things have happened. And I think that we could find pieces of our history to justify pretty well anything we want to do in the present. And this is the problem with history. You have to be careful with it. And I must say that maybe it's my fault that in 2009, on the occasion of the 150th, I decided to look into the phrase as free as air and water. And this was an occasional piece, by which I mean it was written for a particular occasion, which was indeed for trustees and alumni at the very moment of the celebration of the 150th. So I thought I would do a pretty detailed forensic analysis of that phrase. So I want to tell you what I said as a way of a cautionary note on the uses of history. The phrase was used by Abraham Hewitt. He said that he'd heard this from Peter Cooper, so it's a hearsay. I don't know if Peter Cooper said it or not. All I can say is that Abraham Hewitt, his son-in-law, and in some ways someone who is much more important to this institution than even Peter Cooper, that's how he related it. And he related it at a very particular moment in Cooper Union's history. And that was the grant, the cash, from Andrew Carnegie of in excess of $300,000, which basically matched whatever the Cooper family had already put into the institution. So I think another piece of correction we might want to make is that this is much a Carnegie college as it is a Cooper college. And Andrew Carnegie gave it for a particular reason, and that was to allow for what Cooper had always hoped, which was a thoroughgoing Polytechnic Institute. But even then, in 1901, no one knew what that meant, and no one knew exactly how it should be planned out. In fact, for a time, there was an equal division among the trustees about whether this meant a high school for technical science, so you'd be more like Bronx Science, or it would mean a day school of engineering. And it was that second option that won out by 1901. And what basically happened at that point was that the monies that Carnegie had given the institution allowed for the elimination of renters in this building. You may know that the bottom two floors for many years were given out to commercial establishments and some non-profits, and it was the money from that rent that underwrote the daily operations of the place. But the trouble was, and I suppose still is, space. You know, cash is one kind of problem that any academic institution faces, space is the next. And there was no way we could grow until we got rid of those renters and received this extra endowment. And so it was at that moment that, in celebration of this new body of cash, the phrase "as free in air and water" was applied by Hewitt, in some sense to show that this new school was going to continue the work that the night school of art and science had always undertaken. I hope that's kind of reasonably clear. Did Cooper believe that education should be free? This is a more difficult point, but we know certain things. He always said that the School of Art and Science at night should be free. And as you may know, there's a history now, a new history, a history of a history, which talks about the tuition, the issue of tuition. And here I'm going to try and tread as carefully and as accurately as possible. Yes, tuition had been charged, and in one particular division. That is the day school of art, which was for women only, had 2 classes of applicant, an industrial class and an amateur class. The amateur class paid. The industrial class were free. And you might say, well, what an odd arrangement and what odd terminology. Well, the terminology is entirely 19th century, and the theory was this. This art school had an existence prior to coming to Cooper. It was formed in 1852 by a group of women who wished for largely their daughters and friends of their daughters to have a place to learn the arts of design. It was following a model that had been adopted in Philadelphia and indeed at the Royal College of Art in South Kensington for women. And that was paying, or it's fee-driven schooling. And when it came to Cooper, it was the trustees' decision at that point that 2 classes of applicants should be admitted. Those who could not pay for the training and those who could. The amateurs were those who could, and the industrial class were those who couldn't. Now you might think, well, this is kind of odd terminology, what was going on? The trustees believed, in 19th century terms, that the amateur women actually of a higher social class, would behave better than their poorer sisters. And therefore, the presence of these amateur women would actually raise the social tone of the school. As you can imagine, these are kind of concerns we probably no longer have. But again, I beg you to get back into the 19th century. I mean, I don't think in the terms of the justification of charging tuition that's a consideration, that wealthier people coming here would improve the behavior of those already here. But who knows? It's a new kind of, as you see, the dangers of history are multifold. So that's that particular history. Yes, indeed, tuition had been charged in that school. I'm going to say no more about it, because the whole point of my initial analysis of the phrase free in air and water was simple. It's very difficult to use history, or it's too easy, I should say. It's too easy to use history to justify what you want to do. What you should do is what you think is right in the present. History can inform that. But what I was trying to say to the trustees at that moment in 2009, after 150 years of institutional history, is that what we do should be examined regularly. Of course it should be. And we should look at what is right, what is practical, whatever else we want to bring into the mix. But, it's our institution now. The legacy of the past can be both light and burdensome. And Peter Cooper is very inspiring. But he had a lot of great ideas. He had a lot of peculiar ones. And the peculiar ones are what I usually like to try and tell my students about, whether they're remote control torpedoes and other things which were going to liberate the Greeks. Some things never came to fruition.